a lot to get through. So what I'll do is I'll just plough on, and hopefully others will catch up. Yes. Right, good evening and welcome to one and all to the Kilsyth Community Board meeting. I think everybody around the table know each other, but just in case there's visitors, my name's Bill Craik. I'm the chair of the Community Board. Do we have any apologies?
Chair, I only have a couple of apologies, one from Councillor Kerr, one from R. Truesdale. That's it, thank you.
Richard Truesdale, right, thank you. Right, the minute of the previous meeting and matters arising. That was the meeting of the 1st March. Yes. First of all, we could have a proposer for that meeting, that minute. Alan, right, a seconder. Gabrielle. Is there any matters arising from that meeting that anybody wishes to raise? No hands, no. But I have one, in a sense, it's really just that item 4 was driving digital locally. I wonder if we could get a progress to the next stage and a timetable of what we're doing in the town and what we're going to do regarding the digital element, even if it's just circulated and some kind of report submitted to the next community board meeting. Matt,
Hi,
will you pick that one up?
Yep. Hi, Chair. Matt Castell here. Yeah, we'll make sure there's a further update provided on that, Chair, and we'll get that circulated.
That's grand. Thanks very much. Everything
Chair,
else that's in that minute's on the agenda.
Chair, sorry, Bill, apologies. I was just going to sort of say,
Yes.
just to kind of put any minds at ease that we have already started speaking to our colleagues at Digital NL for been quite a while. So there are kind of we're looking at kind of the best way forward and how we can deal with that, because obviously across the 9 community boards, digital inclusion has been a major issue. So absolutely, well, we're on it, Bill, and we'll move forward with that.
Thanks, Colin. And that's a good point, Colin. Just when you spoke there, it dawned on me that Leanne's not coming tonight. So we've got apologies from Leanne. Right. Okay. Item 4, Chair of Community Council Board Arrangements. I have nothing at all on that. General Community Board Business, Head of Service. What I would like to do is we have a community champion. Hey, Superwoman. I think she's going to have to be to deal with Kilsyth. Hey, Nicole. Is Nicole still here?
I am. Take my leave there, Bill. No, thank you very much. Delighted, Chair, to be here as your community champion. I've prepared a few words, I suppose, just in terms of the outline of what the council's thinking is in terms of the community champion role, and then I'll go on to speak a wee bit more about myself and the role that I'll fulfil for Kilsyth Community Board. Okay, so I think at the outset, everyone agrees that local communities should be at the heart of public service delivery, and the introduction of the Community Empowerment Act put this onto a legislative footing. The response to this within North Lanarkshire was the creation of the North Lanarkshire Partnership, and probably more importantly, the creation of the 9 community boards across the area. The purpose, as you know, of these boards has been discussed in detail with everyone on the group, and I don't intend to go back over this in detail, because I recognise that arriving tonight, you're all far more knowledgeable about it than I am. But it's rather to say that following the creation of the boards, there was a realisation within the council that there needed to be a more direct relationship between the council's corporate management team and the communities that it served. The purpose behind that was threefold, and I'll just run through those three purposes. To ensure the overall corporate direction of the council and the plan for North Lanarkshire was and continues to be aligned to the overall needs of the local communities. Not a guarantee that we will agree on everything, but of course it's critical that both are incorporated into the overall decision-making process. Secondly, that there needed to be a long-term commitment to the work of the council's communities team, who have done an absolutely fantastic job over the last couple of years getting us to the stage we're currently at with the creation of the boards and the soon to be signed off local outcome improvement plans. And finally, that the way in which the council and its partners delivers community services has to change. Although the budget setting process for this financial year and next will not be as painful as recent years, there is a full expectation that come 23-24, the country as a whole will have to start paying for the pandemic. One expects and agrees that the funding for the NHS and education is something which has to be protected. And although there's little argument around that, this then leaves the inevitable overall reduction in public spending sitting with the other frontline public services. I can't speak for the police or the fire service, but I do know that the council services are under huge financial strain at present, and a further reduction in funding will, at best, not be easy. So we have to look, so we have a couple of years warning that this is coming, and we have this time to look at a different approach in the delivery of public services across North Lanarkshire, one that puts communities at the very heart of our service delivery, one that makes best use and achieves the greatest impact with the reduced public resource that we have, and ultimately leads to an overall improvement in our local communities. But in order to achieve this, both communities and public agencies will have to work together as a collaborative. As one can't be successful, we recognise, without the other. And if we don't work as a collective, then inevitably we'll both fail. So the question for the council was, how could it best deliver this? And what was agreed that firstly, there would be a restructuring of the council's overall corporate management team, which has recently been completed, and the new corporate management team meets every fortnight and incorporates all 19 of the council's heads of service team. To then provide a direct interface between the council's management team and local communities, it was determined that 9 of these heads of service would be assigned as community champions and allocated to each of the 9 boards. As I've mentioned previously, this new approach is not a short-term strategy, and we know the changes outlined within the plan for North Lanarkshire, and indeed these contained within the Lloyd, are long-term objectives. So it was also agreed that the heads of service would remain in place for a period of 3 years, with a review undertaken in around 30 months. The purpose of that is so a and hopefully positive relationship can be built between the head of service and other members of the board, and also that all the heads of service are allowed time to build in an understanding of the issues that are common across all community boards, but also, and more importantly, those that are unique to the board that they represent. So for Kilsyth Community Board, I'm pleased to say, and I hope you join me, that it's myself that's been allocated as the community champion for the Kilsyth Community Board. I am particularly pleased to take up this role in Kilsyth because I'm sure, as many of you know, I was born and bred in Kilsyth, so it's a place very close to my heart and something that continues to matter to me. So I very much look forward to the next 3 years and working with you all. In terms of that role, though, and what it will look like, I have to say at this stage that we're still working on the exact definition and the role of the community champion. A report on the outline of that will be delivered to the North Lanarkshire Partnership Board on the 2nd of July, and I'll make sure thereafter that a copy of that report is circulated to the members of this board. And at the same time, on the back of that report, I would ask members really to feedback to me in terms of what they would expect from me in my role as community champion for yourselves. And that final detail of that report will be reported back to the Council's CMT at the end of September. I've got my own thoughts on it at present, but I think it would be remiss of me to make very clear at this point tonight at the first meeting on what the role isn't, because I think that's easier to define than what it is. Okay, and what the role isn't, it's not to be another point of contact to support specific issues. So missed bins, areas of grass not cut, potholes, etc. As you know, we have processes in place to deal with all of that. This is meant to bring real added value, and as I said earlier, a direct link to the Council's CMT. So what's important is that the role of Community Champion works with each and every one of you to deliver for the board, the CMT and the communities team to see how we can best deliver as a collective on the key themes which have been outlined in the LOIP. It's also my role to speak to the other heads of service to determine what's working well within the other areas and how we can translate that into our own thinking to make that work for Kilsyth. So at that point, Chair, if it's okay with yourself, I'll stop summing up that I will ensure that a copy of the NLP board report is circulated after the 2nd of July. I'd ask for any comments upon reading the report in terms of what anyone sees my role as Community Champion would be to pass back to me before the end of July. And of course, going forward, I'm happy to discuss on a one-to-one basis with anyone who wishes to contact me directly what that role will be and how I can best shape that to suit the purposes of the Kilsyth Community Board. I should have said my role within the council is as Head of Environmental Assets, hence the references to grass, etc. But I leave, if you like, that hat behind when I come to the board. I'm very much here as your representative of the council's management team on the board, and I hope that we can together work through some of the big issues which will affect Kilsyth as we move forward. So Chair, thank you very much for that time, and I hope that introduction has been useful.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Yes, very helpful, and welcome to the team. And I can assure you that you're going to be busy. Not that you're not busy just now, but now that we've got a name and a place, we know where to go. Thanks, Nicole. Anybody got any questions to Nicole at this stage? Nope. Alan, are you speaking to Nicole? You're on mute.
Right. There we are. I noticed that when Nicole said she was not just another point of contact, I saw Bill deleting 15 emails. So,
yes.
so it's a good. It is a. I think that's important that we know how Nicole operates within the system. She's not just a sounding board for complaints.
Correct. Right, well, thank you again, Nicole, and I hope you enjoy your time with us in the next 3 years. You might want to leave screaming and shouting to Des Murray saying, help me, boss, help me, but you're stuck now.
I'm sure I won't, Chair. I'm sure I won't.
Right. Next item, item 6, flexible funding. Matt, do you want to speak to that report?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, briefly on this, Chair, just the report that was issued along with the paper to the board. This report provides information relating to the flexible fund and the tackling financial insecurity funding streams which have been allocated to local initiatives in North Lanarkshire. The funding is intended to support individuals and communities impacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was just to ask the Community Board to note the funding arrangements that have been implemented and that further information will be made available to the Community Board as required. The report details areas where funding has already been made available and invested, and where further funding will be made available in the near future. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, if anybody's got any issues to raise.
Thank you, Matt. I just had, well, one query on the report, item 211, was who is the Gold Command? Sounds military. Any idea?
Yeah, Gold Command is the structure that's put in place during the pandemic. It's a group within the council made up of the chief executive. Nicole may be able to help us here in terms of who's actually sits on Gold. I think it's the chief executive of the council and senior representatives of other services within the council and partner agencies to consider ongoing development of policy development and other issues affecting the partnership during this pandemic situation. But it's a response to continuing business as usual as best we can during the pandemic.
Grand. Thanks, Matt. Anybody else got any questions to Matt? Right. Matt, is it possible to have a further report or information in due course on the distribution of this fund throughout our community board area. I specific to Kilsyth and villages. I like on digital inclusion, school uniforms and stuff like that. Just tell us what has been spent from that flexible fund in this area.
Yeah, we can certainly make inquiries about that, Bill, and get as much information as we can localised on that basis. I can certainly tell you, in terms of the aspect about the flexible fund for local community groups, there's been some applications from local groups locally for the £300,000 pot of funding. There's a couple of groups applied in Kilsyth for that funding, and that information will be getting fed out this week to the groups that have been successful in relation to that. So, but we'll get more detail on that and make sure that's brought forward to a future meeting.
Lovely. Thanks, Matt. Alan?
Matt, you say a couple of groups have already applied. Is this common knowledge to all groups in the area, or do you need to know about it?
This was put out, the one pot of funding was put out in March time, Alan, to all community groups who are on our list and the list of our partners in Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire were all made aware of the availability of funding.
Thank you.
Grand. Thanks very much, Matt. Item 7, the community partnership updates. Matt, the board development sessions. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Thanks again, Chair. Just wanted to highlight to the board that as Nicole's already alluded to in her introduction, about the importance and how critical it is in achieving the aspirations of taking forward the community boards as effectively as possible, that our local community groups and representatives are very much at the forefront and leading on this going forward. So as mentioned earlier in the role of the community champions, we want to work together in a positive way to make the boards a successful model, leading on recovery and delivering on the plan for North Lanarkshire. In the board development sessions, we want to cover the areas that you are interested in. We alluded to this a wee bit at the last cycle of the board development session at the boards, but what we've done is some development areas have been identified, but we want more input from board members. So in relation to this, following some discussions across the 9 board areas, we've looked at, for example, partnership working, community engagement, the role of the board member and the chair, decision-making processes, participatory budgeting, the local development programme, partner budget processes, not just the council's budget processes, but also other partners, community planning partners such as police, NHS Lanarkshire, Scottish Fire and Rescue, for example, community asset transfer, mental health and other local health strategies, and community safety. That's just some of the issues that have been put forward as potential discussion at board development sessions. So briefly, what happens next? We need to agree the initial areas for development. Areas I've mentioned earlier are examples, but if you've got any other ideas for that, then we're going to be asking you in a couple of different ways as to what those actually are. We're in a process at the moment of preparing a survey that will go out to all the boards and asking people what they want to hear about at board development sessions. And we're looking for somebody from the board to be part of that, part of those discussions, developing that questionnaire going forward, so that we're asking the right questions and pitching it at the appropriate levels for that. This will allow us to identify the common themes for inclusion within the board development sessions, but also, and importantly, preferred learning methods. We want to look at different learning methods for people, whether it's online, whether it's paper-based, interactive approaches can be considered as well. So over the next few weeks, we want to pull together the surveys. If anybody's interested in that, they can let us know if they want to become involved in that process. We'll listen to the feedback from that, and then towards the next round of boards, we'll look to formally launch the board development sessions, taking on board all the views of partners and individuals who have put forward information. That'll then be continued to be monitored, and then we'll prepare the board development sessions over the next few months. So just in this, Chair, if anybody's interested in that, you don't have to tell us just now. If you're interested in it, please let us know and we'll ensure you're part of that process. But we'll all come back to the full board in relation to this in due course. Thanks, Chair.
Good, thank you very much, Matt. Anybody got any questions to Matt on that? If anybody wants to contact Matt regarding that, there's an email address that's generally circulated for community matters, and you can contact them on that.
Chair, I think Councillor Brandon McVeigh would wish to make a wee comment.
Oh, Heather, sorry, missed you. Didn't see your hand there. That small, delicate hand of yours.
That's it, my shovel. Hi everybody. No, it's just a plea, really, to everybody at the meeting tonight. We've got some new folk who have joined us, and I think sometimes when we connect into these meetings that we fall into speaking in language, you know, that we don't speak in plain English. We've got a jargon that we use. We've said the word LOIP about 900 times already, and that just sounds like a strange thing as opposed to the local outcome improvement plan. So I suppose it's just a plea that if we're asking people to participate in things, that if we're talking about things like participatory budgeting, some of us have been about for a long time and know what that means, other ones don't. So if we're exploring what people want to learn about or what people want to ask questions about, if we can have a descriptor of what that is, or a frequently asked questions for community boards develop, something like that, I think that would be really helpful to help folk feel able to participate. But I suppose from my point of view, what I would say to every participant, regardless of whether you're an organisational rep, a community organisation rep, here is yourself, or as somebody else, stars in your eye style. There is no such thing as a silly question. The only silly question is the question that we don't ask. So whether it be in the chat bar or asking it, please don't hold back, ask the question, because we've got a collective of people here that's quite unique, and it would be wonderful if we can support each other to do the best that we can for our community. And if I can help in any way with the survey, happy to do that as well, Matt. Thank you.
Grand. Thank you, Heather. Right, if there's nothing else on that, can we move to the local development programme, or in jargon terms, LDP? And anybody that's been involved before knows what the LDP is, but it's a local development programme. And who is going to speak to that? Is that you, Matt?
Yes, it's myself again, Chair.
Right.
Thanks for that. Just in terms of the local development programme, and just following from what Councillor Brandon McVeigh is saying, the local development programme, for those who aren't familiar with it, is budget has been allocated to the local communities from the council for a variety of different types of projects that are community-led. They can range from a number of things, for example, car parking within neighbourhoods, entrance features, heritage features, CCTV. These are local, community-led, small-scale projects for the council has allocated a budget to across the 9 community boards. And just for example, this year the council's allocated just over £58,000 to Kilsyth to be allocated on particular projects. And within the report, if you can see in the report, it shows that currently we have approximately 165,000 of projects that have been approved in principle for the local development programme at the moment. So these are not, we're not saying these are projects that are all going to go ahead, but these are just the ones that are sitting on a holding list at the moment. The report itself provides an update on current projects within the LDP and gives details of future capital budgetary position, as I mentioned earlier. So the potential projects in the holding list, as I said, quite outweighs the amount of money that's been allocated for year 1. So what we're looking to do now is that the communities team will look at the feasibility of developing the projects that have been approved so far in principle, and look to take the ones that we can take forward to delivery where possible. These projects, as I say, given the budget limitations, will be delivered over more than 1 financial year. We will ensure that the community board is kept fully informed of projects as they progress. We'll be issuing shortly a new, it's not so much an application forum, but it's a forum that people who have got an interest in a particular type of project they want to bring forward in their local community, it's a forum that can be filled in. It asks about where the project is, some background to the project, what kind of community involvement there's been, for example. And it's just something that gives us a starter for 10 in the basis of developing the project development progress. So that's where we are with this at the moment. Projects will be prioritised on the basis of wide community support, links to the local outcome improvement plan, of which there'll be further explanation shortly, and that they can be delivered within reasonable budgets. So it's just to ask the board to make the board aware this is the next steps in relation to the local development programme, but also to note the formula used for the distributing the funds, which are based on not just population for each board area, but also the SIMD figures, which is the figures relating to multiple deprivation within particular board areas, and that's where the calculation comes from for the amount of money that's invested in each board area. But I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Right, thank you, Matt. Has Jean, you're waving.
That's it. Let me unmute. Matt, you spoke about CCTV, and I'm sure Michelle will come in and kind of back up, but can we get a list of where you've had requests for CCTV within the community? I know that you put out an appeal the last time and you asked for requests through. I sent you through some photographs earlier on today of the vandalism again at the sports field in Kilsyth, and that is one of the areas I think we need to look at as a priority for CCTV going forward. I know we've discussed the quick 2 minutes with you earlier on in this, but I'm just conscious that we're trying to encourage our young people to get involved in sport as a diversion from other things, but they're going down to the sports field and it's covered in obscene graffiti, and fires have been set on the synthetic surfaces. The officers who work for the council, some of them are formerly North Lanarkshire Leisure, have been fantastic at working with the football teams to try and resolve some of the issues, and agreed to put a light up, etc., at the side of the building to let so that the CCTV will be a use. But it would be handy, because we have some hot spots in the town, to see where you're considering for the CCTV rather than just put it in as a figure within a report. Thanks.
Matt?
Okay, come in, Chair. Yep, absolutely. What we've done in the last few weeks, we've tasked the team that deals with CCTV provis to look at the area and do a survey of what the coverage is currently within Kilsyth, and they're going to be coming back hopefully quite soon with a report giving us their recommendations as to where they think would be the most effective places to have CCTV included in the area. And I'll pass this on to the team as well in relation to that, because we have asked for that. And once we have that information, once we have their proposals in place, then we can bring that back to the board and have further discussion about that, to see what your own views are on that in relation to extending where the CCTV is within the area. Just to pick up, there has been a figure put in there for CCTV in the areas. That's just something we've tried to save from a local development programme, to have a funding that allows us to have a more proactive response to some of the issues that are affecting the area. It allows us to do some things through redeployable CCTV or fixed CCTV. What we're doing is we're developing this is a new application form which we did use for a CCTV in the past, but it's something we're developing further now. And in that, just picking up on Councillor Brian McVeigh's point, is this takes in information from the police, from housing, from other partners in the area, who will give us an idea of local communities and people who live in the area, to say, if you've got a particular problem in that area, tell us about it. We'll include that in the application. That will form part of the assessment, and only if there's sufficient information within that will that move towards us investing in that it's something that's going to be worthwhile, it's something that's going to be value for money in a lot of ways as well, so that we're investing, which can be quite expensive apparatus going into somewhere, that it's going to have the desired effect on that we've got police support on that, we've got Scottish Fire and Rescue support, for example, and it is based on intelligence, it's based on information about particular hotspot areas, and that's where we tend to go with that. It's not just a case of going in and putting a camera in, spending money on a camera just for the sake of putting one in. There is a lot of information behind that leads to that work being undertaken.
Okay, Matt. Michelle?
Thanks, Chair. Just to back up what Jean said, I'm fairly new to the board, so I'm not really sure, what happens and stuff. Obviously, we've applied.
You've disappeared, Michelle.
Oh,
Your connection wasn't very good there.
Where
You want to repeat what you said there?
Well, just to back up what Provost Jones said, I represent Kilsyth Athletic Football Club. So we are down there every day of the week, apart from a Sunday. Obviously, we've got over 300 kids going down there using the facility. We're all volunteers, and I just think we would really benefit from CCTV. Just to obviously back up what Provost Jones saying, the vandalism. We've been ourselves victims of verbal abuse. Our cars have been damaged. We've got ongoing correspondence with the local police just to try and kind of deter the level of vandalism and things down there. So, I mean, I know you're talking about applications and stuff. Fairly new to this, so I'm not really sure, obviously, how it works. But if we could be kept in the loop about how to go about that, I really think that would be a really beneficial spot in the town for CCTV, especially coming up against summer holidays. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And yeah, we'll definitely, now that you're involved and we know the background in that, we'll definitely keep you involved and help you through these processes. Help you to understand how to make your points known.
Chair, do you mind if I come in? I was just going to
the
LDP stuff. Sorry, I'm very pleased tonight that George Frew's here from Banton and Kelvin Head Community Council. So it's good to see you, George. Your first meeting as well. So excellent. Thank you so much. George is just here to try and just explain a little bit about the request that he's going to make in relation to the LDP. And so he'll keep it quick and simple and just kind of give you a wee bit of background. And I'm sure that the two local elected members will, if they want to come in and just give any more information, then that's absolutely fine. So, George, if it's okay, Chair, for George, just to kind of...
on you go, George. Yes, nice to see you.
Thanks, Colin, for coming in there and giving me my chance to speak. It's just Banton Kelvin Head. We've had some problems with parking, and we've got two plots within Banton itself, and we were looking for it was four parking spaces within the village, but any time that we've put forward any of the locations, we've come up against opposition. Now, this is where Collins came in, because with the local church shutting recently, the local war memorial is down at the church as you come up Kelvin Head Road. Now, Collins been out and there's been a surveyor looked at it, and there's a big crack up the back of the memorial. Now, we would be looking to bring the memorial further into the village itself, and with the people knowing agreements for parking areas, we know that there's been some money put forward for that, and what the Banton Kelvin Head Community Council is maybe looking for as part of this, the local development with the budget, is if we could maybe transfer some of the money that was maybe going to be put forward for parking areas to help us bring, if not the memorial itself, or to try and fund a new memorial with community support.
Thanks, George. I think that as a project would be very, very good. The relocation of the war memorial, I've been involved in these in a past life, and bringing them into the village area, into the community area, was a huge asset and a benefit to the community. The fact that I'd like to pop out and have a look at that one, especially with a crack up the back. So I would think that would fall into the LDP, there's no problem in that one. But I presume, Matt, the forum or the application of whatever it is you're calling it would be sent out to the likes of George at the Community Council.
Thanks, Chair. Absolutely. This is something, if the board, if that's the way that the board wants to consider that, we can add that to our list of projects as of this evening. We can consider that going forward on that basis. Colin will make, I think, he's already in contact with George there in terms of having that application or the forum completed. Happy to look at that and take that forward, Chair.
Yeah. I think, is there any more questions from the board? Jean?
Chair, Councillor
Heather
Brennan.
had indicated in the chat bar she wanted in prior to me. We're used to in the council, you have to put in the chat bar the word comment if you want to get in their meeting. You're not allowed to just put your hand up. And I think Heather and I are that used to it. We're both put in, but Heather was in before me looking to speak.
Well, I think to keep it fairly simple for the inexperienced in WebEx, we don't want to be as an expert as council at council meetings. So I think, yeah, putting your hand up, ideal. Heather, on you go. Sorry.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Jean, for allowing me in before you. I appreciate it. I think the Provost was just trying to make sure she didn't leapfrog me. That was all. And yeah, we should be as formal. And as I've said at community boards before, please call me Heather. If we were in the chamber and they were all council officers, then councillor would be appreciated. But I'm happy to be called Heather. But at home, I'm a Kilsythian, and you're my community, and I'm yours. Just to support George, I think the War Memorial being brought into the village, Bintone, I think would be a positive thing. And I think it's something that could be delivered relatively quickly for the village. But I think the village needs the support of the council to look at the positive evolutions within the village. You know, the pub, the gymnastics club, the play park, all these things that are bringing visitors into the village, and how parking can be considered as a solution. And that's going to be a bigger and more complex thing to look at that warrants consultation and consideration. But as a short-term project that can be delivered this year, I do think the War Memorial could be done, but I wouldn't like to see parking be lost for the village as a consideration going forward. But I'm more than happy to support the War Memorial going forward, because I like you, Bill, acts a reflection and remembrance should be done as part of your community, not to the side of the community.
Yes. Thanks, Heather. Jean?
Again, you know, I had arranged the survey to be done of the War Memorial. Officers in the Nicole team, I think, comes under your team, were really good. They come out and got a thorough survey done, and they would be very, very concerned about trying to move it because it would probably disintegrate. And I think maybe it's time for the village to design what they would see, and to encourage the young people to be involved in the design of a War Memorial, fitting for what how the young people are want to take this forward, because we're conscious that when we turn up at the cenotaph, in some areas, you have more older people. We want the young people in the schools to become involved in making sure that any War Memorial that's in the village is something that they feel part of, and it gives them a chance through their history to research all those who lost their lives for them within their village community. And I think that was the kind of consensus of opinion when we attended the community council meeting. George can correct me if I've got some of that wrong. Thanks.
Alan, you wanted to come in, and Matt, you put your hand up. Well, Alan first.
Yeah, a couple of points. George, did you say you were looking for 4 additional car parking spaces, or you looking for a sort of trying to rationalise the car parking? Because I know how difficult it is, especially, for example, when they have the gymnastics night, the round about the hall. So I know it's extremely difficult to find a spot. So you're looking to sort of to have a kind of overall look at the parking in the village.
Well, what it was, Alan, was we were looking at, you've got the plot at Kelvinside Crescent. As you come in, we had sort of got a place there for four bays, parking bays. But when we had sort of said to the people in the Crescent, they weren't too happy the way it was going. Parking at present, they're actually parking in the grassed area as well. So they're actually bumping up onto the pavement and then getting into the sort of grassed area. There was also another location across with the Swan on Mill Road as well. But again, there was sort of opposition. But we've got a meeting tomorrow night regarding the community centre, and that's just across the road for it. So we're hoping to sort of bring that to a close with everybody sort of agreeing to things. So hopefully we can bring that to an end. But as Jean said, we're everywhere. We've got the pub open again, we've got the shops open again, which is near enough on the cross, and then we've got 4 nights or 3 nights in a day in the Saturday for the gymnastics in the community hall. So it is quite a busy wee area in the one sort of location. But hopefully tomorrow night we can get that sorted between the community hall and the local residents.
Thanks, George.
Okay.
Matt?
Thanks, Chair. Just to pick up on some of the Provost had mentioned, Chair, about community involvement and development of projects like this. It's just to very briefly mention a similar project we did last year, 18 months, about 2 years now, given the COVID situation, in Hart Hill, where we developed a new war memorial in Hart Hill. And it's very similar circumstances in that there was a church there that was closing, and there was a war memorial that didn't really have public access. And we did a project there that allowed the war memorial in the church to be incorporated into a new war memorial in the village that was led by the local community group. The schools were involved in it, helping with the design, the wording that was used, etc. So it was all very, very much community led and part of the consultation process. And if we're going to take these kind of projects forward, that's certainly the model we would look to adopt going forward.
Good. Right. Any other questions on the report? Right. Alan, is that?
I would just say, could I go back to the CCTV? I'm just wondering if it would be possible to, as a demonstration to the board, to link into the system and show what we've got just now working. Now, I've seen it done before, where we can link into the camera at the top of the main street and the bottom of the main street, and give some sort of idea of how the system operates and how it's managed at the centre.
Would that be possible?
And it'll certainly speak to the team that deals with that, Chair, and see
Right.
what we can provide.
Good idea, Alan. Yes. Right, before we leave this report, I had various things myself on the report. I think the format of the report needs a bit more information. Like, for instance, on Appendix 1, and I'm not looking for answers for this just now, Matt, but it's something that we could discuss in due course. The Rennie Road Field Sports Area, it rose through project budget £57,000. But that's not quite correct. It's like the one below that, the Dumbreck Marsh. The project budget is 100,000. the project cost for that overall project is 2.6 million. So what we'd like to see is a bit more explanation. Is that 57,000 for Rennie Road the LDP's contribution? Or is it the full budget? And the spend to date is fine. That'll explain itself in due course. But I think what we probably need is the project budget is £100,000, say for Rennie Road is £100,000. Next column is LDP contribution, £57,000. Other contributions, X and Y pounds, so that we know where all the money is coming from to be able to run that project and make it work. Because going to George's project, the relocation of the War Memorial, there is no way that the LDP allocation that is given to Kilsyth will fund the relocation of a war memorial. And the fact it is cracked, as Jean said before, it will need a new one. Right. So I think that needs to be expanded out to give a bit more information. And we can have a chat about that out with the detail out with the meeting. When you come to the potential community board LDP programme, we've got Kilsyth Bun Green / Bogside Gym, 30,000. The Colsium Estate Fountain, Montrose Gardens, etc., etc. We come to another one at the bottom, Rennie Road project, to be confirmed with community groups. Where did that come from and what is it? We need the background knowledge. So these forums are a document, an A4 page or whatever. We need, as a board, we need to know what these things are and who's promoted them, where have they come from, and how did they come up with a budget cost? Because if we're going to be asked to agree this report, at this stage, on that background information, there's no way that I could ask the board to approve that report because we don't know any information about these projects. And projects appear onto it, like the Rennie Road project, out of the blue. So we need to look at the background information in that to come to the board before any decisions could be made. And the other aspect was on Appendix 3, I started to look at how Kilsyth was getting £58,140 as their LDP contribution. And the other authorities, the other areas, the other board areas, were getting considerably more than Kilsyth. Now you come down to the community board population as a percentage of North Lanarkshire and the deprived population of the multiple deprivation areas, 3% and 4%. What we'd rather see there is, fine, I can accept the percentages, but what I'd rather see there is Kilsyth has a population of nearly 12,000 people, just under 12,000. If that is shown as a head, a number of persons per population that is in deprivation in Kilsyth, is it 2,000? Is it 3,000? Is it 4,000? Well, looking at the figures and trying to work these out, it looks as if there's about 3,000 round about 3,000 people in Kilsyth in deprivation areas and suffering. What is that then in relation to Cumbernauld? How many people as a population in Cumbernauld? I don't know what the population there is. Is it 40 or 50,000? Is it still is Cumbernauld got 15,000 or 10,000 people in deprivation? See, we're getting at the ratio of people in deprivation to the number of people in Kilsyth, rather than dealing in a percentage. Now, that might be a bit complicated. We know that we're not going to discuss that in detail tonight, but it's something that we need to look at.
Well, if I can maybe try and answer some of your points, Chair. Appendix 3, the figures there are like the top line of figures are the percentage. Like Kilsyth makes up 3% of the population of North Lanarkshire. That is about 4% of the SIMD figures in North Lanarkshire. So it's compared to 3% of the population generally, but 4% who are classed as living in SIMD
conditions.
Index of multiple deprivation. So that's the position that we have on that. But I don't know what more information you're talking about. You want the actual specific, but this is based on a figure at a time. You know, for when these figures were calculated last year, on that basis. So there's an award. 23% of the funding is top sliced and then distributed across the 9 community boards based on the percentage of SIMD figures. So Kilsyth actually gets more of the 23% than it would get of the figure based on population. So it gets more money based on SIMD than it does on population.
What I'm trying to find out, Matt, is how many people in Kilsyth, if we've got a population of 12,000, how many people in that 12,000 are in the multiple deprivation? Not a percentage of it, because I'm not interested in somebody being a percentage or something. I'm interested in the person being involved.
This is maybe something I'll discuss with you off table, Chair, about this.
I think so, yes.
Maybe look at that, because I mean, to be honest with you, we'd need to discuss what the value of that level of detail would have. But I'm more than happy to have that discussion with you.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to do that. Yes, not a problem there. I don't want the board to be, and people that are coming into the board to be thinking that people are in the community are just a percentage. I want to see
There's certainly no disrespect meant in it, Chair. It's just a way of representing the figures
work out.
The population.
But I'd rather see that there's 12,000 people in Kilsyth and 3,000 of them are in multiple deprivation.
Right. Well, it's not going to be that figure, but we'll certainly happy to look at that and show you how we can present that.
Whatever. Yeah. And we need to look at the background information on these projects so that we can then start progressing these projects.
Yeah, well, that's the idea of what we're doing tonight, is to start looking at the ones that these projects have came over the last few years, and we're now getting to the stage where last year we didn't have any further budget to take these forward. We're now in a position where we do have additional budget to take them forward, and we've got these new proposal forums. And what we'll be doing with all of these projects is that we'll be filling in this proposal forum, going forward with it, getting the ideas where the information came from. Some of those projects might fall off altogether because they've got some of them are quite historic. And if we get to the stage that the interest in them is no longer there, then they'll just fall off altogether, and we can start to build up a fresh list of projects. Because I say that the information there shows that we've now got funding for the next 5 years allocated to the local development programme, so we can start to timeline project delivery over a set period of time and get the local communities more involved in that process. But it's no problem providing more information in terms of where we are with the budget itself. The one about the Drumbrek Marsh does say it is a contribution to a bigger project. It does mention that in the narrative.
That's right.
And we can certainly include that. Yeah, and we can certainly include that in other reports going forward.
Yes, because what I don't want is these projects that are listed as a potential community board LDP projects. I don't want the ones that are already on the list and been there for several years. We don't have information on them, but they get dropped further behind because other ones come in. I don't want a community to find out. For instance, if Banton Parking had been on there for 5 years or 3 years, I don't want Fisher Avenue Parking come in and usurp them and knock them back. So I think it's clear that we
absolutely.
need to know
I totally
what
agree with
these
you.
are.
No, that wouldn't be the case, Chair. If we're looking, if a new project comes in and it's of the same value, has the same community support as a project's been there for 2 or 3 years, then we will be looking at the ones that have been there longer. As long as they're projects that are deliverable, then we would take those projects forward first. And and that's why I was talking about a 5-year programme. Some projects that come in just now, it could be year 3 before we look at those projects, and that's what we'll start to prepare going forward. It could be year 3, year 4 for delivery, but as long as we can start to timeline some of these projects going forward, that's the intention. It's not about new projects coming in and knocking other ones out. Absolutely not. We want to determine the feasibility of the ones that are already there first. If they are deliverable, then we'll certainly move forward to try and deliver those as soon as we can in the earlier financial years.
Right, and so the board needs some background information to that. Just now, nobody knows. There's Jean asking the one about the CCTV. So we need background information on that.
No, absolutely. But just to I don't want to hog this meeting in terms of LDP, but in terms of the figure for CCTV was put in there. We couldn't possibly ask for that. The board agreed at the last meeting to consider that as a figure for potential usage, because CCTV can be sometimes quite reactive. I could get a call tomorrow to say there's a real issue in Kilsyth that requires CCTV. We've sought some flexibility within that part of the budget to allow us to utilise that to be a bit reactive as well as proactive with some of these things. So we can't always have where at all times we're going to put CCTV. It's about having a pot of funding that allows us to be reactive on that basis. That's what that's about. And the stuff that the province has brought forward tonight is something that can certainly tap into that going forward. The projects themselves, and I see the background to these projects, that's the intention now. The intention is to now move to the stage where we get the forum filled in, we'll look at potential consultation and report that back to the board to say, we've consulted on that one, it's deliverable, it's project, it's got community support, and we're looking to take it forward. But the thing about, as you'll be aware in terms of budget delivery, we need to be able to start moving things forward. We can't wait a quarter every time we want to get input from the board in relation to projects. We need to be in a position where we can start to look at these projects, build up the project briefs for them and take them forward and keep the board in the loop in relation to that.
I would agree 100%, because I don't want to find it at the end of August when we have our next board meeting that we've got these projects and we're deciding on which ones are going to go, because if they're community-led projects, then the board needs to be involved, and we find that the 58,000 that we've got this year, we haven't got time to spend it.
Exactly. That's why we need to start the ball rolling on that. Yeah, absolutely.
So, even if we've got to have a special board meeting to deal with the projects, then we'll haul that together. Good. Okay, Matt. Thanks for your help on that.
Chair Janet McCarroll, wants to say something.
Oh, sorry, Janet. I didn't see you. Yes.
That's okay. Well, it's just a question. You've talked about the feasibility of these projects. Who is going to determine the feasibility?
That's something that the communities team will do, Janet, in relation to some of the projects come forward to us. They could come in, for example, they might not be on council ground. So if it's not council ground, then we wouldn't touch those projects straight away. If it's projects that are, just say, for example, somebody comes in and says it's a play area they want to put into an area. If we've already got a play area relatively close to that area, then that project wouldn't go ahead on that basis, because we've already got one relatively close. If, for example, it's a car parking site, that people want to consider for an area. If we look at that and the ground investigation comes back to us and tells us there's a gas main underneath that will cost 40 or 50,000 pounds to move to allow us to put a car park in, then that project falls at that point, because it wouldn't be cost effective to put a half a dozen space car park in that's going to cost us 70,000-80,000 pounds to deliver on that basis. So that kind of feasibility, we would do that as part of the initial stages, but also we're looking at getting concept designs produced so that we can go out to local communities and say, we're talking about doing that kind of project in that area. And if the local community, as George was mentioning earlier about Anton, for example, we go out with a concept design to an area and that local area says, no, we don't want that. We understand people have asked for a project like that, but we don't want that project in that area. Then it falls at that point as well when we're looking at community consultation, because we wouldn't put a project through that doesn't have community support.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Right, can we move to the next item, which is the local outcome improvement plans, LOIPs. First of all, before I pass it on to Colin, I would like to thank particularly Leanne, Pollock and Colin Bruce for pulling these documents together. They've done it for 3 board areas in the northern part of North Lanarkshire, and I'm sure their heads are buzzing with the content of what's in these documents. I certainly see this document as a critical document for the board and for the community, because it picks up everything from sweeping the streets through to social deprivation, the lack of access to digital facilities, to computers or the internet. So it picks up the whole lot. And if we're in agreement with this tonight, that this document will go away for sprucing up, polishing up. But it doesn't mean to say that between now and seeing the finished document, we can't get subgroups up and running and start dealing with some of these issues that's happening within the board area. Yes. Colin, do you want to say anything to this?
Colin, you're on mute.
You with us?
God, I am now. The local outcome improvement plans are basically community plans that will underpin the work of the community boards for the next few years. So they're very, very important. And there was lots of engagement done with organisations, seldom heard voices, youth organisations, services, etc., etc. So there's been a lot of work done to this, but it is just the start of that kind of journey. We've been able to gather data and evidence that kind of shows the facts and figures just now. But it's really important we kind of move on, because we want to kind of then develop the kind of baseline evidence, which we've got some. Obviously, we've got quite a lot actually, but there may well be gaps that we haven't been able to. So I again, Bill has said kind of the gist of things, but you know, the plans were, to the folk who have been to the last few boards, the plans were sent out. I've been making kind of wee tweaks and changes as any comments have come in, but they are a kind of a starter for 10. And what I can do is, for the people who are new tonight, we can make sure that you get a copy of the LOIPs as well. So that you can kind of see in the kind of the background information, but it's very much about, you know, it being community led. And I suppose the other comment I want to make is that this is not just about the council. This is North Lanarkshire Partnership, and that's really, really important to emphasise. You know, I think, you know, we us within the NLC will do our bit, but we know we're relying on our partners, the police, fire, health, you name it, all with other partners, and we're all in this kind of together to improve the lives of, you know, local people in Kilsyth and Ward 1 and the board in general. So we want to make sure that local people are involved, and as we move forward, you know, and I was just going to pick up on the subgroups. You know, what we really don't want to do is to duplicate anything that's already happening on the ground. So if there are services, there are volunteer organisations are already working on aspects of the priorities already that have already been identified, it may well be that we might go down the road of actually that will be their kind of bag of tools along with other work that they do, but there may also be, you know, that we get, you know, community members together along with services and partners to work on the different priorities. So the initial information that was sent is very much just a Word document. And for those that have seen it, that's not what's going to be public facing. As Bill commented on, there's going to be a lot more work done with graphics to make it far more community friendly. So the basic thing for me is that there's been a lot of work done, and I really want to thank everybody that's been involved in this stage. But there's a lot more work to do, and as North Lancashire Partnership, this is our, you know, this is the start of this journey to, you know, ensure that people in Kilsyth and in Queensburn, Banton, everywhere else, Croy, in Ward 1, have got the opportunity to basically have their say and have their voice heard. So we'll encourage you to, you know, approve the local outcome improvement plan and to help us move it forward on behalf of North Lancashire Partnership.
Thanks very much, Colin. Has anybody got any questions to Colin on the local partnership plans? No? Heather?
Thanks, Bill. Having read the document a few times, it is a really useful document, and I think we're probably not going to be able to underestimate how important it's going to be as we evolve, because as resources get tighter, we'll probably use this as a frame to perhaps provide evidence about why we need to do certain things. And certainly some of the links that could be produced within the document to make them live, I think are really useful, because some of the things that you were saying, I don't know this about this community, that information's within the ward profile. So if anybody was looking through it and going, well, I don't understand what you mean by deprivation, you can click on the profile, you can open it up and you can actually see who and what we're talking about. Not the names and addresses of people, because that would just be Big Brother and weird. But what it can tell you is this: if there's clusters of people who have got a similar challenge, or clusters of age group of particular people, you'll be able to see that kind of information as we can. So just to reiterate and just to thank everybody who was involved in the development of the document, it's really useful, and I think it will be a live document going forward as well that we'll use and utilise going forward.
Right, thank you very much, Heather. Any other comments? So would the board be in agreement that we accept that this can be now developed up into a more acceptable public document? Everybody okay with that? Grant. Yeah. Right, we'll minute that accordingly. Right, if there's nothing else on that, item 8, petitions. We don't have any this month. This community matters, item 9. Michelle, car park tarmac at Sports Ground. Do you want to speak to that?
Thanks. Yeah, so again, myself representing Kilsyth Athletic Football Club. So we're again down there primarily using Duncansfield, the Kilsyth Sports Field, as our home ground. We're down there more or less every day. We've got lets every day apart from a Sunday. And at present it is just basically there's no real kind of surface on it, and we are looking to have a tarmac area with possible lighting to facilitate, obviously, you know, the usage of the amount of traffic that we are generating down there. Car parking spaces, floodlights for safety for the kids. Obviously, at present, it is a one-way in, one-way out, but again, it's just basically a free-for-all, and our main kind of objective here is, you know, we've got fears that, you know, somebody's going to get hurt, especially in the winter time, because once the lights are over, basically the pitch lights go out and it's just total darkness down there. So it's I mean, again, we're volunteers and you know, we're escorting the kids out to their parents in the car, but the amount of cars that are down there, it's really difficult to kind of police that. And obviously, if there was car parking spaces and lights and stuff like that, it would just obviously it would be a lot safer for the kids. It would also mean that, again, on days, match days, I mean, sometimes you've got matches going on the two pitches, and kids maybe still training. It just, you know, people are bumping up in the grass. We'd actually on our own made a kind of cordoned off area just for a kind of gathering area. I mean, obviously we can't police that either, so members of the public were just kind of moving it, and then parking as far up really is the gate. It's just really dangerous, and we've got kids down there ranging from 4 years old right up to 21.
Right. Okay,
Thanks.
Michelle, thanks very much for that. Yes, I know that area quite well. I haven't stood on that touchline for many a winter. Right. Now that it's girls and they're not interested in the football, so thank goodness. Anybody got any questions to ask Michelle? Heather?
Hi, Michelle. I know that I think this takes us back to your point as well, Bill. This has been something that's been on the LDP list for a wee while. But one of the things that was always going to be is the local development programme resource is very much catalyst funding. You know, it gives a start or it means a contribution that community groups and others can match against. So I suppose the question that I have is, what work, if any, has been done with Kilsyth Athletic or anybody else to try and develop the rest of the funding that would be needed to make these things happen? Has there been any action at all since it was added to the LDP list?
I would assume that the answer to that is no. Michelle, has Kilsyth Athletic done any fundraising, or have you got any costs relating to resurfacing that?
So again, fairly new to this. Myself and Ian only recently took over in the last kind of 4 years with the kind of running of the club. And to be honest, when we took over, it was just pretty much, you know, each team were just kind of running their own age group. We've managed now to get it into, we have a committee, we have you know, we have an organisational committee. We've just recently went down the road of applying for charity status. So that's in, you know, we are at present doing that. Again, Provost Jones been really great, helping us, guiding us in the right direction. Again, we're just kind of, you know, taking a stab in the dark at all these things that you're obviously not used to. So I think, and you know, until we knew exactly how much it was going to cost and stuff like that, then, you know, we're pretty much relying on the council guiding us to say, right, it's going to cost X amount, we're willing to do this, and hopefully by that time we've got charity status up and running. Sorry, we've got charity status up and running, and we will be able to do, you know, some fundraising, or, you know, apply for a loan or a grant or something in order to, you know, make that happen.
Right, Michelle. I think probably the first thing is that we need to get some kind of indication of the detail of what's wanted and needed down there. And from there, once we've got that, then Matt, does that fall into the LDP 10% for investigation and getting budget costs?
Chair, it's certainly something we can look into to determine what the scope of work is required. Some of the feasibility work, as we mentioned earlier, for that, that's certainly something we can do to determine about ground ownership, about work that's required, any other partners involved. We can also link in through our capacity building team and our colleagues in Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire in relation to providing advice in relation to grant funding, external grant funding. And as Councillor Brian McVeigh mentioned, the LDP can also be used as leverage funding. There's many really good examples of where the LDP has been a match funder or has even been just a small portion funder for certain applications to bigger funding streams, and we've been able to make a contribution to that. So there is a variety of options that are available to that, and we'll certainly give a commitment tonight to ensure there's contact made with Michelle and the group to see exactly where we are, and we can report that back, Chair.
Bill, I know that Colin wants in here, but I think the point that I was making here is this is a historical LDP project that actually needs update and revamp. Michelle connected with the appropriate officers to make it happen. So I can exercise the question to make the point that there are things on the list that for whatever reason there's not been action on. So we need to find the status of them so that we can make progress, because this would be a huge asset to the town taken forward, and would help in a number of priorities that we've just agreed in the local outcome improvement plan. So the sooner we can kind of get that connected, the better. So it doesn't need approval, it's because I've already got it in principle.
That's exactly what I was saying in the LDP report. But anyway, Jean and then Colin.
Obviously, the big issue was the up until recently, whilst it was council land, North Lanarkshire Leisure run the facility on behalf of the council, and we were trying to dialogue between both agencies. Michelle and I have met on numerous occasions and Ian with North Lanarkshire Leisure. They have a list of everything that's requested. It's now back in-house with the council, so it will be easier. The problem is when you're talking to the officers in that were formerly North Lanarkshire Leisure, they're finding their feet back in the council and who their contacts are. So you're right, it might be worth getting a big refresh of the whole project, but looking at what's there, because the groundwork was already done with North Lanarkshire Leisure, and I'm sure through Nicole's office she can get the relevant head of service to pull that out to save going over old ground.
Right, Jean? Yes. Colin?
No, absolutely. I think that, if our office has said there's been work done, excellent. And I think, Michelle, if it's about connecting the dots, obviously we know that with whatever it is, £57,000, it is probably going to be far more like third-party funding, but there will be opportunities. So really, I think I'll try and maybe make contact with you like ASAP, and we'll maybe meet up for either a Teams call or in Kilsyth somewhere, and we can have a chat about where you are.
Colin, what I was going to say is I think what we need is a site meeting down on the site. We've had a good discussion here. I think we contact Michelle, get a meeting on site with the relevant officers, and I would like to know about that, to come along to that meeting as well. There's no point in discussing it again through WebEx or whatever. We need to see what's what on the site. So who's going to contact Michelle regarding a site meeting? Colin? Or is it Matt?
Well, we'll get that organised, Chair.
We
can we'll get that sorted.
We can start.
Smashing.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Michelle. Down to me. The next one is TOR, Terms of Reference. I was going through the minutes of the previous boards, and I couldn't find a minuted approval or the board's agreement to the terms of reference. So I really just wanted to see that minuted. I disagree with some of the things that's in it, but we need that thing approved tonight to say, yeah, we're okay with that. It will develop over the next 3 years, but it also ties in with the LOIP, because the LOIP is linked to the terms of reference. So any comments on the terms of reference? No? Okay, we'll take that as can be minuted and agreed. Right, the progress timetable for Kilsyth Town Vision and the Town Hub. Jean and Heather and myself and Alan had a very good meeting with Charles McCabe the other day there on the Town Hub, and that explained an awful lot of the process. And we've actually got a meeting with Craig and David Greer on Wednesday to go over the Town Vision. But Craig, is there anything you would like to say, give us an update on what state the Kilsyth Town Vision's at just now?
Yes, Chair. Thank you for the invitation to attend tonight. I'm going to give the board a quick update on the progress of the Town Visions. For those who are new to the Community Board, this is the 4th time that the principle of the Town Vision's been presented to the board. It's originally back in December for a general meeting, and then there was a request for a specific workshop held exclusively for Kilsyth, which was also very well attended in January. Roughly about 34 people attended that. But effectively, the Town Visions are a high concept document about the direction of travel that the council is promoting for both the delivery of its own services, but more importantly, the delivery of developments by the private sector. Unlike the LOIP, it's not a plan, it's a vision. So it wasn't a package of projects that were to be delivered within a specific timescale. And to be perfectly honest, that's frustrated a number of people, not just in Kilsyth, but across North Lanarkshire, because most community groups are very interested in specific projects that have a specific impact in their community. However, the Town Visions were never about specific projects. They're about setting a direction of travel, and more importantly, trying to facilitate and engage with various partners in what they see their town being like in 10 years' time. So it's not an exclusive proposal for the council. It's a very much a community focus and a partnership focus for the Town Visions. So as I say, there are 3 stages to the public engagement around the Town Visions. There was initial discussions and workshops with investment agencies, private landowners, businesses and registered social landlords. Then we went out to all 9 community boards, at which time we invited the community boards to say whether or not they wanted specific approaches. So therefore, in a Kilsyth context, we had the Kilsyth workshop where we presented in detail the findings of the draft vision that the council were wanting to promote to the community. And following that, we then went to an open public consultation, a statutory 6-week public consultation. However, this had to be undertaken in the constraints of the pandemic. So rather than myself and my colleagues being in a little shop front on the main street and there to talk to people through an exhibition, we created a virtual exhibition which was available online through the council's website. Over 60 people viewed that exhibition, and we had 7 written responses to the exhibition itself. Now, in addition to the responses to the exhibition, we also had quite an extensive and detailed response from Kilsyth Community Council. And we've also, in terms of trying to engender a debate amongst the community, as the project lead for all of the Town Visions, and particularly Kilsyth, I've had a number of very informative and meaningful discussions with local businesses, for example, in Garrel Road Industrial Estate, but also with the community groups. picking up on a point that Colin Bruce made, we were very much trying to reach seldom heard voices. So in addition to the community board individual workshop, we also went out to the Tenants and Residents Association. We also had a specific event for the youth through the North Lanarkshire Youth Council to try and get the visions, the sort of the view of the visions from the people who will hopefully be still resident in Kilsyth in 10 years' time, because effectively it's their vision that we are looking to deliver. So as I say, summing up, there was general consensus of agreement that now is the time to try and have a discussion around what we want the time to be. There was a disagreement about some of the content, but in general consensus about the need for a discussion and the need for a vision. So moving forward, the town vision has been requested by the corporate management team to be finalised over the summer through engagement with the subgroup that's been set up to basically represent Kilsyth Community Board with regard to the town visions and the town hub. So we want to have maybe 2 meetings with that group during June and July, because there's a requirement from the CMT for the visions to be finalised and presented to the Policy and Strategy Committee in September. So we want to have that additional discussion to give feedback in detail about the points that have been made to us through the consultation and engagement, and to basically sit down and build a consensus around the draft that's in the public domain, refine that, and then basically produce a final document for each of the 9 community board areas in terms of moving forward with the town vision. So September is the date for the document to be finalised. One last point, Chair, is that these are high concept proposals. They are not detailed plans. We deliberately didn't use the word plan. We also deliberately did not use the word action plan. What we're going to do as soon as the final visions are agreed with the community, presented to that committee and approved by the committee, that's when the work begins in earnest with the co-production of action plans for each town, where we will be talking about specific developments and specific actions within each town. And to give you an example of that, one of the things that came through that meaningful engagement with landowners is that the gap site at Main Street opposite the former post office, the sorting office, which has been an eyesore for a number of years, the owner of that land has now approached the council to ask if we would be willing to look at the redevelopment of that site, which, of those who have read the draft town vision, was envisaged as part of a sort of northern gateway public realm associated with the redevelopment of the adjacent retail parade for residential development. So that's one positive outcome from this so-called shaking the tree towards the vision, in that we're getting people actually approaching us to say, yeah, we see what you need. I actually own that land. I want to sit down with you and I want to talk about how we can maybe deliver those projects. But the delivery happens as soon as the visions are finalised. So from September onwards, we envisage very much structured meetings with this subgroup to talk about co-production of physical projects. Thank you, Chair. That's all I'd like to say. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Craig, indeed. Now, just before we move on to that, Janet, it's very difficult to see who's waving their hand and read the chat column at the same time. And I see that you wanted to speak. Are you okay? Right. Okay, any questions to Craig on the town visions? Nope, right. Thanks, Craig. That was very good. That was an excellent explanation of where we're going and the kind of time scale that we're in. And it'll be good to have a chat on Wednesday and a wee bit more background to that, rather than all the background that we get from here.
No, thanks for that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Kilsyth flooding report. I know that Stuart Irvine, who I spoke to a wee while ago, about 2 days after he retired, I was having a chat with Stuart Irvine, who was the engineer handling this, and he was looking forward to putting his feet up with a bottle of beer and just enjoying the sunshine. But now he's retired. Do we have any progress on what stage this report's at? Anything?
Chair, if I might give a verbal update tonight. I said because I was coming along to the meeting, I would break the first rule that I already said in dealing with my own services. But flood risk management planning is part of my remit as well as head of environmental assets. So I said I would give you an update tonight. So the board will be aware that the flood study was initiated prior to the flood event, which occurred in Kilsyth in August 2020. Since that time, various agencies, including the consultants appointed, WSP, have been working on an options exercise, optioneering, for resolution in terms of the flooding issues in Kilsyth. That report was actually received just at the back end of last week. It's a draft report, a very early draft report, so I'm afraid it wasn't ready to come to the board tonight. But I can tell you that it does propose 3 options. I don't have the detail of those 3 options, but what I would hope is that the report will be finalised before the end of June, and that we'll be able to share that report, and officers will speak, Bill, either to yourself as chair or to the group as a whole, on the early actions within that report. What I would want to point out is that obviously a number of people were affected by the flood event last August, and the council, whilst we wait on the consultants and the team work through the options, we haven't stood still either. So the team were quite keen that I pointed out that there was significant vegetation clearance last year along the Ebroch and Garrel burn to remove any obstructions within the burn and any obstructions to the flow. And also, actually, one that they wanted me to particularly mention is that they undertook clearance of silt and debris from the Garrel burn in March this year. Now, I think they were quite astounded in that there was some 500 tonnes of silt removed from 2 sections, a 260-metre length. Now, any of you who know anything about flooding at all, obviously the channel has become reduced in terms of the volume of flow that it can take. So the removal of that silt should significantly assist. There are further plans in terms of further removal of silt deposition in the Ebroch and in around the Quarry Road area when we're permitted. Many of these activities, of course, are restricted around bird nesting seasons, etc. So that all goes to work through the options with the consultants. And just to recap, I would expect the report to be made available before the end of June once we get it finalised with the consultants. And we'll then be able to talk through the detail. And I'm sure, as you're very aware, there are a number of different partners involved in that as well. A fairly complex situation and site in terms of involvement from Scottish Canals, SEPA, and others in that as well. So, Chair, I hope that's a decent enough update at this point of time, and the report will follow as soon as it's completed.
Excellent, Nicole. Thanks very much indeed. That gave us a good insight into the report and the fact that you've got the draft. And what I didn't want happening was that it posted on and we ended up with other flooding problems in Kilsyth next winter. So thanks very much for that briefing, Nicole. The Kilsyth Community Board proposed change of name. I was always very conscious that it's called the Kilsyth Community Board, but it covers Ward 1. And in Ward 1, we have several villages and other local communities scattered throughout there. And what I was suggesting was that if we're allowed to, can the board, and if the board's acceptable, can we call it the Kilsyth and Villages Community Board? so the villages feel part of it. Right. Any comments or disagreements, or is it okay to change the name, Matt?
Well, certainly, I don't envisage any particular issues with that, Chair, but I'll certainly include it in the feedback, the report that would go to the kind of parent committee for the boards, which is the Community Empowerment Committee. I'll certainly feed that back in there and see if there's any further comment on that. I wouldn't envisage any particular issues, but I'm happy to do that.
Anybody got any comments on it? Heather?
I think we're in a very unique position in our board. I think there may be one other board, so maybe not unique, where we are one council ward area included. So I would like to think that there would be no issue from the parent committee because it's only about us and we could call it whatever we want. And if Kilsyth and Villages is the name that folk would prefer, then I think we should, because I think it's important that folk recognise that, because each of the local councillors, certainly over the last 2 terms, while the ward name is Kilsyth, we all reference our context of ward as Kilsyth and Villages.
George, have you got any comments as being one of the village reps?
One of the village people, Bill.
You're not that old, George.
No, I think that would be actually quite good. Obviously, one of the sort of outlying areas, it would make us feel a wee bit more welcomed. Rather than having the big brother as Kilsyth, you've got Kelvin Head at the bottom of the road, and then Queenieburn and Croy. So, and then whatever other area that might be getting built up in the next few years,
Yes.
that could be added. So, no, happy enough with Kilsyth and the Villages.
Right. Could you, Matt, could you process that and see if we can get the board name changed?
Absolutely, I will do, Bill. No problem.
Good. Thanks very much. Jean, you wanted to speak about the sorting office.
I mean, they're like everybody else that's heard about the sorting office. I heard it by word of mouth and nothing official. Part of the statutory consultation when Royal Mail are doing something is for it to be submitted to the local authority for consultation, but today, when I've checked, there was nothing received by any of our departments to do a discussion. The email response I got from Royal Mail is a holding response, but what it did say was that it's not a closure. In their view, it's a relocation. Unions are playing it very close to their chest at the moment. I've been in dialogue with a couple of union officials off the record, but they are playing it very close. The staff have had a meeting with the Royal Mail headquarters staff to explain to them that it will be Cumbernauld they'll be moving to, and they will get 3 years travel expenses, but they can take that as a lump sum, and if they take it as a lump sum, they'll take 12.5% off it, and it will also be taxed, which is unusual for travel expenses to be taxed. So we're in the position that Royal Mail have not responded a full formal response. I know you sent an email on, and I sent you a follow-up email address, which had been given to use a second one, but again, nothing official has come out. We're working on what we're getting told by word of mouth within the community. So I think as a board, a letter should be going on behalf of the board. Perhaps one of the officers, like somebody like Nicole as our community champion should be taking this on, because after all, this is a council committee, and as a local authority and a council, there has been no consultation at all with us.
Thanks, Jean. Yes, I got that. I followed up the website because I wrote to the chief executive, Guy Thompson, and but it kept bouncing back on me. And that email that you sent me of Michael Hogg, I got a response by return. I did that this morning, and I got an email by return, very concerned about our concerns about the sorting office, and they would investigate this and get back to me. So my normal chase-up email time is 10 days, but I've slotted him in for 7 days. So he'll get an email from me in another 7 days if I've not had an answer. Nicole gets them every 10 days. But in between, I've got to buy her a cup of coffee sometimes. Heather.
Just a question for clarity. Craig, see when you were talking about potential assets, you know, people approaching the council to buy, did I happen to hear you saying that the people who own the building that includes the sorting office have been in touch with you saying, would you be interested in buying? Did I hear that correct?
No, you misheard, councillor.
I'm glad I've asked for clarity.
Yeah, you misheard. It's the vacant site opposite the former post office. You know the new flatted block on the corner of West Burnside Street and Main Street? It's basically, it's the vacant plot between that and Archway.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify before I started a conspiracy theory. Thank you, Craig.
No. Okay.
Right. So if there's nothing else on that one, what I'll do is, as I said to Jean there, I'll send out an email to them in 7 days' time on behalf of the Community Council. I think, yes, Nicole could write on behalf of the, as a champion, but I think it would be quite good if we wrote as a board to them as well. Pursue them in all angles. And I don't know whether Nicole's letter would be more effective on North Lanarkshire Council paperhead. It's the actual council.
Chair, if I might come in, I'm more effective in North Lanarkshire Council headed paper either, but I'm quite happy to try on writing on behalf of the community in my capacity as community champion, and we'll try, I suppose, a double-pronged approach.
Grand. Thanks very much, Nicole. Right, I have put on Cat's Close / Market Square. There's two things linked to that, and Inspector MacLeod, who's patiently listening here, knows fine well. Market Square, an old RBS building, which I'm trying to move away from calling it that because it's no longer there. The youths hanging about, they've been cutting through Cat's Close in Kilsyth, through Market Square, through Cat's Close, which is a senior citizens area. They've been causing problems there, and out into Burn Green Park. Now, I first raised this at a meeting on site with Housing in November last year. And I also raised at the time, linked to the conservation area, the patchwork rough casting, pebble dash that was going on, particularly on the building inside Market Square. It was like sticking up two Belisha beacons on the outside of the building. It looks terrible. But I'm not getting an answer back. It doesn't matter how many times I write. And I'm not getting an answer back on that. So, Heather, as convener, could we meet you and I meet down there, or could you chase this up and see if you can get an answer?
Happy to chase up. I think one of the issues that we have is there's a historical right of way there. So there's an
That's
issue
correct.
regarding what kind of gate or used and utilised, but I will happily chase that up with housing. Happy to do that.
Right. In terms of the right of way, a diversion of a right of way can be submitted to the planning department, and the rerouting of that potential right of way there is a matter of meters, because there is a direct access further along on the pavement along Market Street, and down into Burn Green. This is just, it's like a triangle. Pat's Close is forming the hypotenuse of the triangle. So,
Bill, I'm happy to look into it, but we're happy to look into it. We don't need to get into the triangulations of it during the meeting. Look at it, I can get it. We don't need to do both.
sorry for being too technical. Right, Heather. The other one.
Not too technical at all. I was just thinking about the verbose nature of the meeting that we're in.
Yes. The main entrance to Bamillick Primary School. I was asked to deal with a head of service, and we got on great with the head of service, and but the head of service that we're dealing with is not getting any answers from the council officers that are in charge. This is the main entrance into Bamillick Primary School from Kingsway up to the school gate. It's about 50 metres. And it doesn't belong to the roads department. Education have got nothing to do with it, and it was referred to property services, estate properties, and I've been writing to them, and the head of service has been trying to get information, and we're getting nowhere. Nicole, you had your hand up. I don't know if you can throw anything into the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just to say that since we last met, which I think was a week, I've been in direct contact with the responsible head of service. So they have undertaken to look at the access and come back to me and therefore us. So I will continue to pursue that, as I know that you will, Chair, to make sure we get the resolution that's required. But I think we are getting closer. Sometimes it is important to understand who's not responsible to narrow down who is, but the work is ongoing in the background. Yeah.
Yes, because that's been on the go since since November as well. Right. Okay, that's good. And just on the other community matter that's not on here, Matt, thanks very much for the bins on Airdrie Road car park. Andrew's been in and cleared a lot of these polluted bins. But I'll talk to you about other things relating to that out with the meeting.
That's fine, no problem, Bill.
Input from community planning partners. Neil, have you got anything you want to speak to?
Good evening, folks. Yeah, I'll just provide, I'll be as quick as I can because I know time is marching on, but I'll provide just a very quick summary of the main events since our last meeting. So, violent crime, we'll look at first. There's, pleased to report, there's only been one serious assault this period. That occurred in May in Kilsyth, and there was a 33-year-old male arrested for that. Other than that, violence-wise, 20 common assaults, for which 12 of them arrests have been made, and there have been 8 incidents where arrests were made for people in possession of offensive weapons. 7 of these were in Kilsyth and 1 in Croy. Housebreaking, we had 1 theft by housebreaking in Croy. Inquiries are ongoing into that one. 5 attempt theft by housebreakings in Kilsyth, Out of these, 2 arrests have been made, one being a 20-year-old male who was recently out of just released from prison, and he was caught in the act of a break into premises in Kilsyth, and it was then found that he was responsible for 2 additional thefts in the town. We've had 2 thefts of motor vehicles in Kilsyth. Both of these remain undetected, and we had 2 break-ins to vehicles, one on Market Street and one to the rear of the main street. And I know there's been discussion about CCTV, and this one just highlights the importance of public space CCTV in our town centre in Kilsyth, because that's what captured this male trying to make off after breaking into the second vehicle. That was picked up in the public space CCTV on the main street, at which point officers attended and managed to effect an arrest. And on the CCTV matter, I know there was discussion earlier about the dialogue between Matt and the police, and just to confirm, we did have that dialogue, so I've already provided input in terms of police-wise, according to our stats, where we would really benefit from public space CCTV. Moving on, lawful fire reasons, we only had 1 reported to police, and that was a lawful fire reason to a vehicle in Kilsyth in May, and inquiries remain ongoing with our CID department. Drugs, we had 23 instances of people found in possession of drugs over the last period. We had 2 cannabis cultivations, in fact, sorry, 3 cannabis cultivations, all of which were in Kilsyth. Approximate valuation for these is £5,000, £14,000 and £6,000 respectively. We also had a significant seizure, some of you may have seen this in the papers, significant seizure on Friday there in Kilsyth in Townhead Street, where heroin was seized with an approximate value of £27,000, and there was a male arrested as a result of that. We appeared in court today. Other than that, antisocial behaviour wise, as you well know, Chair, there's been for a long period of time many reports of youth gathering, causing annoyance, littering, etc., consuming alcohol in Colsey Park, and also a crossover into the Coochies. So we've been doing our best to, in particular the community team, trying to provide additional attention, additional focus down there. So we did that to good effect 2 weekends ago, whereby we had the assistance of the mounted branch just to provide that additional presence down there. It was fair weather, and as luck would have it, there wasn't a great deal of activity to report, to be honest. There was engagement with a handful of youths, no real issues. There was a small amount of alcohol seized, but that's something that we will be looking to revisit, just as we are in other areas around about Cumbernauld and so on. Other than that, linked to antisocial behaviour, just worth mentioning that our joint visits are now back up and running with our partners in North Lanarkshire Housing and the antisocial team, and these are particularly valuable. They've been a real miss to us because of obviously the COVID restrictions placed on everyone. So they're back up and running to good effect, and examples of how valuable they are is the introduction of 2 antisocial behaviour orders, ASBOs, on 2 of our most kind of high-hitting offenders in terms of repeat locations and repeat offenders. So that's always the best tool that we have available to us in terms of tenants, where we get antisocial behaviour orders, which with a power of arrest, which means that we can take immediate action to any reports from concerned neighbours. And that's it from me, Chair. Nothing else to report, unless there's any questions.
Alan? You're on mute, Alan.
Sorry about that. The ongoing problem with trail bikes and quad bikes, is there any advance on how to deal with this? I know how difficult it is to catch them in the act. We can hear them, and by the time you've got your camera out, they're past. And last week, I think both Heather and I heard two bikes passing the down Kelvin Way at the school finishing time, and they must have been doing 40 or 50 miles an hour in a built-up area. And but the problem is that they're passed before anybody can capture them. I'm just wondering if they're any further forward in dealing with this.
No, you're absolutely right to highlight it. And it does continue to be an issue, although I have to say that there has been a real downturn in the amount of reporting that we're getting. But I'm realistic enough to know that a large extent of that can be down to members of the community just getting fed up reporting it, to be quite honest, because we have been unable to catch any offenders to date. But just like what you experience yourself, we have put in place plainclothes officers to go down just in an effort to try and get closer. Because as soon as they see a uniform from a distance, that's it. We've got no chance of getting close. So we have put in place twice in recent weeks. We sent 4 officers down in plainclothes. But again, same result. There's been no apprehensions to date. But yeah, I have to say there's been a downturn in reports certainly, but I'm aware that it's still an issue and we'll continue to look at that.
Any other questions? Heather? Janet?
Just to add to Alan's comments that it is a continued and ongoing activity between the Coochies or Barwood, as you know it, and Croy Hill. They're there almost every evening and probably for 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday and Sunday. So it's not just a kind of one-off, it's repeat vendors, and photographs have been supplied to the officers previously. It's the same group, same bikes.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that, Janet, and I appreciate that photos have been sent in. However, there's not a great deal we can do with the photographs. There's no registration numbers. They're not easily identifiable. So we're limited in terms of what we can do from there. But absolutely, anyone that does have photographs, keep sending them in and we'll do everything that we can. The reality, unfortunately, is we are restricted in terms of if we were down there on bikes ourselves, we wouldn't get authorization to get engaged in a pursuit for safety reasons, which is frustrating, to be quite honest, but that's just the restrictions that are imposed on us. But we are waiting. This is it's certainly not unique to this area, to Ward 1. This is an issue. I know my counterpart through in Airdrie has experienced very similar issues. So we're just waiting essentially for our turn. There have been bikes which were subsidised by North Lanarkshire Council, and we're waiting for additional resources to be trained up in them, and then hopefully we can start seeing a wee bit more kind of executive action being taken across the board.
Any other questions to Neil? Neil, for the life of me, I can't remember whether I copied you in, but I have written on behalf of the Community Council, to the Community Council, to the MSPs and the MP, asking for a review of the licensing legislation for these bikes, because you can buy a road bike and it's got to be registered for going on the road. These bikes can be bought and they're not registered, so nobody knows who owns them and they don't have a number plate. So it may take a wee while, but you never know. The DVLA might request at the end of the day that these bikes are registered when they are purchased new.
So I did see that you included me in that, and yeah, that's another kind of foundation that goes with the legality of these bikes.
Yeah, well, I will continue to pursue that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. David, on the fire brigade.
Good evening, folks. I've circulated my quarterly report that has the statistics in it for the Q4 of last year, and I'd be happy to provide any further information on any of those in a follow-up should it be required. I'd like to speak a wee bit about some of the other projects that are going on within the service at the moment. We've just been given the go-ahead by Education to get back into the schools, so we're going to target that over the next month before they finish up, and try and get the kind of fire safety message out before the break for the holidays, because we generally see a kind of spike in secondary fires throughout the school holidays, and we've seen a wee spike in this in May as well. So we're looking to target the resources over the next month to that. Street soccer has also started up in Burn Green on a Wednesday, and we're looking to get down and get involved in that. I think it's been running 2 weeks for the last 2 Wednesdays, but we've not been able to get a resource down to have a presence at that yet, just to operational activity. But it is on our radar, and we hope to get down and engage with the young people down at Burn Green on a Wednesday night. The other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is within the report is regarding recruitment. There's a number of positive action events in relation to recruitment for women, underrepresented groups and ethnic minorities. So our recruitment's open all year round, but there's particular events targeted at these groups. I think they run into March next year, so the timetable's there, and I'd be happy to provide any more detail on them if you could share them with your networks. And the final thing I would like to draw your attention to is our long-term vision for the service. So this was released for consultation today and can be found on the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service website. And I encourage you to go into it and contribute your views to see what you would like from the Fire and Rescue Service over the next 10 years. And this is about us evolving as a service and reacting to the challenges that the communities that we serve are going to present us with over that time period. So it's went live today, and I think the consultation runs for about 6 weeks. So I would invite you to have a look at that, and I'd be happy to take any questions on that or anything else that you may have.
Thank you, David. Michelle?
Thanks, Chair. Just to jump in there and what David's saying about engaging with the young people. Myself and the rest of the coach volunteers down at Kilsyth Athletic are running a 6-week free summer club for various, just anybody, Kilsyth in the villages. We would be more than happy to welcome yourself along if you wanted to come down and you know, try and speak to some of the young adolescents and kids within the town, obviously, on these issues, given the fact that we do obviously experience a bit of vandalism, i.e. you know, we've had space of the pitch being set on fire, the side of the pavilion, the bins, etc. I mean, we would welcome you down there, and over the 6 weeks when we've got everybody all together down there, not just members of your club, but obviously members throughout out the town, kids throughout the town who are welcome to come along.
Michelle, more than happy to do that. I'll put my email in the chat bar. Be more than happy to come down and discuss kind of fire safety in general. Part of our long-term vision is also assisting the Scottish Government in their out-of-hospital cardiac arrest strategy. So that's something else we can do with the kids is CPR demonstrations and stuff like that. So it's just about building the kind of relationships with the young people. So, you know, maybe they have second thoughts. You know, instead of just seeing a uniform, they see Joe for the fire service. You know, and it helps divert their attention a wee bit. We've had some success with stuff like that before. So no, more than happy to pay you a visit during the summer. I'll put my email in the chat bar, and just let me know details when we'd shoot, and we can kind of come to some arrangement.
That's great. We've also arranged for the SYFA. He's coming down to do a bit of first aid, again free of charge with the kids in the town, through that 6-week free summer club as well. So just any time you know, you can come down, that would be really much appreciated by us. Thank you.
No worries, Michelle. Stick my email in the chat bar and just let me know when we'd shoot.
That's excellent.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And thanks, David. David, one question for myself. You're encouraging the crews to report indiscriminate tipping throughout North Lanarkshire and to report it to dumpers and Zero Waste Scotland. If they do that, how does it get cleaned up? Does it just get reported and nothing happens, or does it get reported and something happens?
I think it does get uplifted, Bill. I think it's making an awareness of them. Certainly, if it's brought to our attention, it's a fire hazard. We would add our voice to that to encourage that gets uplifted a bit quicker. But it's not an agency. It's run by the service, but it's who we recommend you would contact. You identify any areas of fly tipping.
Right.
It's becoming an increasing problem, and we are seeing more fires in relation to fly tipping. So it is something, if it's identified in specific areas. I forgot to mention Rennie Road, probably in the last month. That comes into Q1 of this year, but it's also an action in the local outcome improvement plan. So we've seen something like 5 rubbish or outdoor fires up there in the last month. So I'd be keen to hear from community groups up there and, engage with young people or any other community groups that might run in that area to try and get the fire safety message across as well. And it's just raising that awareness through all the networks about, the cost of fly tipping, not just getting it uplifted, but, if it does get set on fire, it then affects properties, it affects people's homes and livelihoods. So it's just raising awareness and hopefully getting people to think twice about what they're doing with their rubbish.
Right, thanks very much, David. Is there any other competent business that anybody wants to raise?
Chair Nicole.
Thank you, Provost. Chair, if I might mention an item which we've certainly discussed before, but just for the awareness of the community board, and it relates to litter bin provision within Kilsyth. The council is looking to very much modernise and update its litter bin provision throughout the entirety of North Lanarkshire, and it has committed to do that in 2 phases. I'm pleased to say that Kilsyth will benefit being in the very north of North Lanarkshire as the first part of that rollout of the new litter bins. What's important for the board to know is that it will require the removal of all of the very small and often damaged, and it does relate to the issues of fire raising as well, but all the very small dog waste bins, small capacity litter bins, and replace them with a standardised wheelie bin within, I'll say an ornamental casing, but a casing which will either be a 240 litre bin, which people will be familiar with outside their own home, or a 360 litre bin. These bins will be put in easily accessible areas, and something else which is hugely important is, one, they will be cleaned so that they are more attractive to use, and secondly, that they'll be mechanically emptied by our colleagues in waste services. So very much a leap forward in terms of litter bin provision. There has been work ongoing for about the past 18 months in terms of phase 1, in terms of the siting of these litter bins. They're obviously best served if they sit in areas of high traffic, and they also need to be at entrances and exits, for instance, in the main street, to ensure that my colleagues in waste services can empty those bins. Some of the bins will ultimately be fitted with sensors so that we can remotely monitor how quickly they're filled, etc. It's a topic I can get quite excited about. The reality is it's probably the biggest leap forward in litter management that we've seen, and Keep Scotland Beautiful are working with us to do pre and post litter analysis in Kilsyth and other pilot areas so that we can see the effect. So overall there will be less litter bins, however the capacity will be up by 400%. Okay, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions, or again, I'm happy to provide the detailed layouts of where the bins will be sited in the first instance.
Janet wants in, Bill.
Hi, Ms. Chair, thank you. It's just, Nicole, you did answer the question that I put my hand up for, was it going to be a like-for-like replacement of bins, and you've said that it's not. That will be a disappointment to some people in the community who view that in some of the sort of, let me call it, walking areas of the town, there's insufficient provision of both dog waste and litter bins. So you've got places like Dunbrek Marshes, and some of the walkways around the town where there's virtually no provision for dog waste bins along the side of the canal and things like that.
Okay, thanks for the question, and I'm more than happy to answer. So part of the tension here is that we obviously, in terms of servicing bins, we need to be able to get to them quickly and easily. So the further bins are from a point that we can get a vehicular access, even at the moment, in terms of a pickup truck, it makes it very, very difficult and time consuming for us to empty. So what we want to do is provide an attractive, I'll say that, a large capacity bin in a place that people need to pass. So whether that's at the entrance, for example, to Dunbright Marsh, whether it's at the entrances and exits to our public parks or our cemeteries, etc., high capacity bins that can take the volume of litter and waste which people would wish to dispose of. And also at the same time do, as part of a campaign, remind individuals, of course, that the council does provide substantial waste collection and recycling facilities at each and every household. So whilst it may not be a like-for-like replacement, because I want to emphasise again, some of the dog waste bins are lucky if they hold 2 litres of waste. These new bins will hold between 240 and 360 litres, dependent on the style. They do need to be in places which are high access and egress, and the idea is that we put the bins where they can accept the most amount of litter. They are accepting of litter and dog waste. There's no need to separate them at all. I know that there's a myth has abounded across the country for many years that they need to be in dog waste bins. Dog waste doesn't, it needs to be bagged and put in a litter bin. So they will accept all forms of waste. But again, it's reminding individuals as well, as part of a wider, again with partners in Keep Scotland Beautiful, a summer clean campaign, that we would encourage people where they don't come across a bin to be responsible and take the litter home. But I would emphasise again, I'm happy to share the plans. The bin rollout we're looking at now at some point in July, and I'll update the chair as soon as we have a rollout date. But I would emphasise again that we're looking at a 400% increase in capacity, okay, with more appropriate bins, which will be emptied on a better frequency.
Thanks very much, Janet and Nicole. Any other questions? No. Any other items for AOCB?
Chair, is it okay if I
No.
come in?
Yes, Colin?
Cheers, thank you, Bill. Chair, I'm sure you'd agree that obviously, as we've kind of intimated earlier, you know, the importance of the community board, not just to the residents of Kilsyth, but across the villages and other smaller communities across Ward 1 in general. So, you know, I'm really keen to emphasise not just to the folk here today or tonight, but to maybe the folk that are listening on YouTube, that the community board is for you. The community board has got to be community led. There's great opportunities to get involved in discussions and decision making about your local community, and you know, I think we really need to try and stimulate that kind of thinking and information and getting it out there. And we're doing the best we can to kind of provide that information. I'm going to try and really ramp up the publicity, promotion, information over the next wee period of time to try and get more folk involved. And I know there's only a certain amount of folk might want to come to a board, but when we get to the stage of maybe the subgroups or the other really, really important items, because that bottom down approach has got to be, it's absolutely vital in this board, in the philosophy and the workings of it. It needs to work, but we need to have participation and the opportunity for people's voices to be heard. And I think that, you know, I think as a board, I'm sure you would all echo those. I was just also going to say as well, and it's, you know, one of the aspirations of the board was to potentially have, you know, maybe revolving chairs if we can get to that stage. So it's just to kind of encourage anybody else that, you know, feels that would have the confidence or quite fancy giving it a go, that, you know, we are obviously, anybody can have that opportunity from the community organisation. We'd be really keen on that. I mean, Bill's doing an excellent job just now and we thank him very much, obviously, but we want to make sure that there's a spread there's a spread of opportunities and for folk to get their voice heard. And I think, you know, I'm really keen that message gets across, that we've all got a shared agenda. We want to kind of share our skills and experiences, and there's lots of different folk out there who have got those. And, you know, whether you want to be involved in the subgroups, the board, be a revolving chair, I'm really keen that you get in touch with us through Community Matters or on some of the information that I'll be putting out hopefully soon. Sorry, Chair.
Grand. Thanks very much, Colin. Yes, I agree 100% with what you're saying there. Yes. Right. Any other queries or bits and pieces? No? Right, well, my apologies. It's 8:46 and the board has run over by 16 minutes, if my sums are correct. But thanks very much for your tolerance and involvement tonight. I think it's been a good board meeting, and look forward to seeing you in between or at the next board meeting. But thank you very much indeed. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.